And we've waited for the levels of the precautionary levels and the levels of lockdown to improve so we can get back to traveling again. And you have so aptly have indicated to us what is required and precautions we have to take. And so tell me quickly, in your experience, how happy were you when we were back to lockdown level 1?
Well, I can't tell you how happy I was, because my entire life I've spent traveling one way or another, a lot for work in the last couple of years. So the lockdown has really sort of curbed my travel wanderlust a lot. And as I always used to say, even when I was working, at least if I was flying into Cape Town or Durban or PE or West London, I could get to see the sea. But of course, having to be sort of literally locked down in your own home and not even be able to go out was quite stressful. And, you know, it took quite a lot of emotional strength to try and get through it. So I was extremely pleased when we could have the levels changed. As you know, there have been a number of level changes, and they opened us up a little bit in level 3 and subsequently even more in 4. But basically, it's been quite confusing to a lot of people, because the government is saying one thing, but when you actually go and try and do it, it doesn't seem to be able to be coming to fruition. And so it's a very fluid area at the moment. So that's why I think we need to focus right now on traveling our own land, because it's very difficult to travel abroad with literally the weekly changes in who's available, who can you travel to, and who can't come into this country. So I think what we need to do is make the time and take the advantage right now of going to visit our local beautiful land, which is fantastic. And I must say, I have been exceptionally privileged to be able to travel a lot, even for my work, up into the Richtersveld and, you know, to all sorts of areas of South Africa that one normally doesn't get to. So I consider myself to have an amazing job that allows me to get to all these places.
Also very beneficial to the economy to travel local, because I mean, we know how the input, and we know the contribution that tourism brings to our economy. And with the encouragement that you've given us now to travel locally, what would you, those of us who will be traveling for either leisure or business, what can we expect? Mention some of the changes that you have indicated.
Yeah, so obviously the tourism industry has had to take very, very stringent steps to encourage people to travel. So in their own businesses, they have to do lots of sanitizing and the social distancing. And so many, unfortunately, sometimes you do want to go and book at a place and you won't be able to get in because they're only keeping 50% of the rooms available for renting out. And sometimes the staff aren't all back at full complement. So please be aware that we do need to support our institutions, but sometimes it does make it a bit of a stress for the actual institutions that you're going to visit, the venues, the establishments, for them to actually work at peak conditions. So you will have maybe limitations with regards to the amount of staff that are available, and you may not get the 5-star treatment that you usually used to, but we do need to understand that and still support them, because I do believe that we have to keep this tourism industry going. It is one of our major contributors to the general GDP, and with the whole fact that the international people aren't coming in, we are losing billions and billions of rands. So it is important for us as South Africans to travel. So what basically phone up and find out whether you can get in. Secondly, whether they have got their restrictions in place, and I think everybody still has it. And I have traveled a little bit since I wrote my article, so I can say that I have been to a number of establishments, and it seems to be that most of the people that 99.9% of the restrictions are still in place. People are exceptionally careful.
Just quickly going to take over from Raven for a couple of minutes as they struggle with a bit of connectivity. On that, Mandy, I think what a lot of people want to know at the moment is what exactly are businesses doing to ensure that people stay safe when they visit a resort or even a B&B?
If you visit a resort or a B&B, what is happening is they, as I said, they've reduced the number of people that are allowed into the actual establishment. So you are getting that. They have spaced their tables and chairs so that they're socially distanced away from other people. They sanitize everything. So before you sit down at a table, they will sanitize the table. They'll bring you fresh, knives and forks and everything. If they need to bring you over salt and pepper sets, they sanitize and wipe them down before they hand them to you or put them on the table. All the staff are wearing masks. They don't all wear gloves, but I've seen the staff themselves sanitizing their hands, and you can always ask them to do so. The rooms are sanitized every single day. So I went off to a game lodge relatively close nearby on that long weekend and asked for early check-in, and they said, unfortunately, we aren't able to let you into the rooms because we're doing the sanitization. However, we did go out and just sit on the patio and have a cup of tea and something to eat. And they did let us come in a little bit earlier than usual. So they are pretty sort of careful about that. There was a spa facility, and certainly that was very, very interesting to see how pernickety they were. And, you have to sanitize. They sanitize the beds before you go onto the beds. They sanitize themselves. They sanitize you before they work on you, which is fine. I think, I would prefer that. As I said earlier, one has to protect one's health. And even when I was sitting outside at the dining area or the patio area, I still used my mask. I only ever took my mask off if I was eating. I put it back on afterwards, so that I was always in a mask, because I feel even if you're touching things with your hand, if you can't get your hand into your eyes, your nose, your mouth, you're not going to get those germs in until you can wash your hands again. So obviously the conference centers and all those things, they are closed. They're not using, they're only using a minimal of these, and most of the conferences are now virtual. So establishments are losing a huge amount of money on a daily basis. The game drives, they still put the people in. We thought they would socially distance the people, but again, they sanitized the seats, they sanitized you before you grabbed the bars to get into the game drive vehicles. Everybody wore masks. You're outside, so hopefully, the wind is blowing. And I was lucky, I always sit in the front seat, so I'm not sort of next to anyone except the driver. And I was exceptionally lucky that the one early morning drive, I was the only person on the vehicle. So I had a private game drive, which was wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think you kind of touched on something as well. I mean, the businesses and the establishments are doing a lot to make sure that they obviously follow government guidelines, but also make sure that they're keeping their staff and their customers safe. But I think what you also touched on is the very important thing of the residents or the tourists, the travelers who go to these resorts, what they can do to actually keep the staff and themselves safe. For example, you mentioned now, wearing a mask. To recommend, or some of the things or some of the ways in which people can keep themselves and the staff at the resort safe?
Well, as I said, I do think that you need to ensure that you are well. And as I said, people with disabilities, as we've heard in the previous talks, we are more vulnerable than maybe a healthy young person or whatever. And so we do need to look after ourselves and ensure that if we're traveling with a carer, that the carer also has to take care to wash their hands a lot more than they would if they were in the home environment. Because remember, you build up a bubble, as they call it, in your home environment, and you kind of sort of safe in that environment. When you go out, especially your carer needs to ensure that they are particular about not touching other things if they're going to then handle you, and they need to make sure that they also keep to the regular hand washing and and you yourself have to be aware to social distance yourself from other people. It's too easy to kind of move closer to somebody because you can't hear them when they're speaking, and maybe your masks are off because you're eating. No, you have to be constantly aware and vigilant, and I think that's what people with disabilities have to understand. And if you are going to travel with your family member or your carer. Try not to go travel with a bunch of friends. I traveled with a friend, but she also works from home, and so she's been isolated. She had a test recently and she was negative. So we kind of, in the car, we wore our masks when we drove together. She had a separate room to me. And so, but we tried to sort of always distance ourselves. There was a beautiful museum there. We kind of didn't touch anything in the museum, whereas I'm usually I love old wood and things like that. I kind of made a point of not touching things. We didn't use the swimming pool area, apart from the fact it wasn't that accessible to get there. But we just, you just try and do the things that you would do, as George was saying, at home with the shops and everything. Especially me as a person with a disability, because I use my hands to push a wheelchair, most of the times I stick things in my mouth because it's easy to then hold on while I'm pushing. So it's so great with these masks because you can't put things in your mouth anymore. And so I think it's created for me in my whole environment. And I think this awareness, and I think you need to take that awareness and make sure that if you're on holiday, you don't let it slip, because it's just too easy to go to a family function and everybody's got their masks off, so you take your mask off. No, keep your mask on, except if you're eating or drinking. But I think we have to be aware that if we are going to travel, is to find places that clearly state they have a policy. And if you go on websites, that's my travel tip of number one travel tip for everybody whenever I explain to anybody or advise anybody, is do your homework before you leave or before you even book. Is go on the websites, check that they've got most of the establishments that have got the COVID things have got it on their website. They've actually put it in saying we have the COVID-19 restrictions in place. Chat to them, ask them what they have and whether it's available. And what we did was we ate on the patio at all times, the whole time I was there. We did not go into the dining room. There was space in the dining room. Even in the evenings when it was a bit colder, we'd put a jersey on and stay outside, because of the fact that we would then be separated from the rest of the diners and in an open air situation. So I think with summer coming on, if you can do that, rather not do the closed dining, do the open dining, and those kind of things if you can. If you're in a self-catering place, take a big bottle of sanitizer, or take sanitizer in a small bottle and take along another big 5-liter with you, so that you can constantly do your own sanitization. Even though you've got cleaners or staff that are coming in to clean, make sure that you just keep yourself sanitized as well.
100%. And then I think something that we'll get onto in a second is traveling in South Africa, because you had some really great examples of things that South Africans can do. But something I do feel like we need to touch on is just speaking about international travel, which I know is a complete headache at the moment. So maybe you can just explain to the readers why that is, and if you have any advice.
Yeah, I do. I actually have a friend who's been battling for 10 days now to get here from England to visit his aging mum. So he traveled to Germany because he's got family there. And then he was waiting for his visa to come through. It took 10 days for it to come through from South Africa. So now you have to apply for a visa to get into South Africa. And he was, waiting and waiting. He was lucky that he had family to stay with. But can you imagine if you have to put yourself up in a hotel and the extra cost that it's going to take? Again, there's this rule, and it's an international rule. Everybody knows it. You have to have a COVID negative test result, and it has to be valid for 72 hours before you land. So you have to be very careful, because we've got limited airlines flying in and out of the country, and one of our airlines is Emirates, and they usually give you like a 24-hour flight because you have a long layover in Dubai. So you need to be very careful that your test isn't done too far before you leave, because you're going to then have to have another test, which is not comfortable. I can tell you, I've had one of them and they're certainly not comfortable. at the airport in order to be able to prove your negativity before you move on. So if you were going to Germany and then into whatever country in Europe that you can get into these days, you would then have to have the test in Germany or Dubai or whatever in order to ensure that you've got that 72-hour window. So that's an important thing. Please also remember, I've just had another colleague arrive back from Paris, and she had a negative test at the airport. She said, yeah, I got a free test at the airport. But she arrived home and she's out working again. I said, excuse me, surely you should be in 10 days lockdown. You've come from Paris, from France, who's really got high numbers. She said, oh yeah, I forgot about that. You know, people are so kind of complacent because they've got this negative test that they don't realize that it takes 10 to 14 days to incubate. And so you need to be super careful if you do travel on business or for, you know, various things. A friend of mine lost his dad and had to fly to the UK urgently for that. And so, you know, you can fly, but they have said they've opened it for international travel, but it's really only for business and, you know, immigration or special circumstances. To try and fly for leisure is still a very, very difficult issue right at this moment.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you plan a trip from South Africa? Because there's a green list and it changes every week. So how do you apply for visas and then get them and then be told you can't travel, like my friend who was coming from the UK? So I think at the moment, as much as we might want to plan to see friends and family, I've got family all over the world. And of course we were planning, it's my special birthday in December and I can't even go and spend it with my family. I've had to cancel that and put it off. So it's quite disheartening, I think. And, you know, I've planned all year and now I can't have that special celebration with the family. So I think we just have to accept this and be fluid and change our plans and try and make alternative, you know, arrangements. And as I said, maybe use this opportunity to go and visit our wonderful land.
Yes, and I think it's so true what you're saying as well. I mean, first of all, I'm sorry about the sacrifice that you need to make, but it's true. A lot of us do need to make these sacrifices to make sure that we keep ourselves and our friends and family safe. And of course, another thing we should also remember that if you do want to do a travel to an international country, you don't know what their rules and their lockdown regulations might be. Every day it's changing. A lot of the European companies are getting their second wave, so they're closing down. So yeah, it's better to stay.
Is that you maybe get there, but then you get stuck there. And then what do you do? And that's the big issue, is that, you know, then you've got to have serious travel insurance, but even that won't, you know, last for 2 months or 3 months. You don't know how long it's going to last. If it's a week or two, it would be fine. But, you know, cancellation and curtailment insurance doesn't last forever. Even if you take the highest possible package that you can get, you will not get sufficient funds, especially with our exchange rate, with our rand being so low compared to everything else. So it is important to think about that. And again, just another sort of area that I would really like to touch on is the workers who work in the travel industry, the staff. They have not had salaries, and sadly their salaries are very low, and they really, really rely on tips to try and make up their income. And so the fact that they're back at work and not getting international tips and things like that, I think we as South Africans have to be more generous. I know we kind of feel if the service hasn't been good, we're not going to give a tip, which is correct. However, just to hark back to that weekend that I was away, the staff were on duty from 8 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, which is not fair. And they were on duty for the full 4 days that I was away, which just is just so sad. And, you know, when I said to the one staff member, how come you haven't got, they said, no, the company says that, you know, they can't afford to bring back the full staff complement because, and yet they're fully booked. But because they're trying to recoup the funds that they have lost over the COVID, where it was really a bad lockdown, the staff are really battling. So, you know, we need to actually be aware and cognizant that we need to try and help and support wherever we can. If we are traveling and we do have funds, that we should assist the staff as much as we can, if we can do that.
Yes, 100%. I think that's such an important message as well, just to remind people that we're all struggling. The economy is a bit difficult, but especially certain industries that were closed and where people couldn't work and earn a salary. If you can give a bit extra, then that's a good idea to do. So I think also the thing that we were very excited about, that we actually wanted to talk about, was traveling in South Africa, because I think that's always fun, getting to know your own country and seeing some of your own cultures. And we also have the advantage of, if you're traveling in South Africa, you can actually drive to wherever you want to be instead of taking...
Much safer. Yeah.
Much safer
for you. The other thing that I wanted to say, if you are driving and your car is full, remember that you can hire equipment in the major centers. So if you can't fit your shower chair in with your chair and your whole family's luggage, remember that you can, hire shower chairs, you can hire transfer boards, you can hire various pieces of equipment in the various centers. Obviously, QuASA have the various centers, and they do have stuff for hire as well. So, you could always contact their head office. They will be able to assist you with that, which I always believe is a good way of doing it, because it does reduce the amount of luggage that you have to take with you, especially if you're driving. Although sometimes when you're driving, you can fit the odd ramp or whatever into your car, which does make it easier. And yeah, I do say we should drive. And then again, if you go and visit our parks, our game parks and things like that, as my article alludes to, you can drive yourself around, which means you're again in your own little bubble, and saves you that extra contact with other people. It also, as I said, supports our national parks, and I do see that Chris Patton is online, so he's our go-to guy, and I wanted to go to the park for that 4-day holiday, but unfortunately Sandparks had their strict 50% availability, and so unfortunately the unit that I wanted to rent was not available for the time, so I wasn't able to get into the Sandparks. But there's lots of other day parks, parks where you go for day trips, and I think even those should be looked at, because I think that just to get out of your own environment, be able to drive around nature, even if you're not looking at game, but just in the nature, restores your soul. You're just not looking at your same four walls. And so I do suggest people try and take time out, especially now that it's summer and the weather's beautiful. Get out, go and have a look, go and drive through nature. And even if you're taking a picnic lunch or whatever, make sure you take your sanitizer to sanitize the picnic table.
Definitely. And I think as well, what you were mentioning is we have these amazing parks, and they have so much to offer, whether it is 4x4 routes, seeing some wildlife, or just, as you said, getting outdoors, doing a little bit of a picnic. And, the advantage of going to a park as well versus maybe going to a hotel is that you do have that freedom of knowing that it's unlikely that you will be in close proximity with someone else. If you go on a game drive in your own car, you're safe. So it has a bit of an advantage. Apologies. We have quite a few questions, so I'm going to quickly just hop onto the questions, but maybe we can get Chris to just chat to us for 5 seconds before we conclude.